So we have someone, like so many, in need of mercy, crying out for mercy. Then and always. And as always, it seems, there are those who can't be bothered. Say, be quiet. No mercy for you. Jesus says, no, come. And deals with him personally, face to face, and asks, what do you want? And cures him. So we see this drama acted out, and we see this drama acted out in Rome during these past few weeks, the Synod that ended this weekend. Very similar. The Pope said in his homily this morning, at the closing Mass of the Synod, referring to today's readings, today's Gospel. You know, those whose faith does not engage with real people in their lives as they are, such a faith is arid. And instead of creating an oasis, creates more desert. And even more pointedly, in his final remarks to the Synod on Saturday, and it's been pointed out, I think accurately, that the Pope reserves his harsh, pointed words for bishops. Very much as Jesus reserved his harsh words for the Pharisees, for the religious establishment, for those with religious power, and also for those, his own disciples who were close to him and who should have known better. Those are the ones he speaks to sharply. So the Pope did too. As you may have read, he said this Synod was a time for laying bare the hardness of heart of those who frequently hide even behind church teachings and good intentions, to sit on the chair of Moses and judge at times, sometimes with superficiality and superiority, difficult cases and wounded families. Wow. Some pretty strong words. And yet it's just being faithful to the gospel. It's a perennial dispute between law and spirit. It's the very center of Paul's theology. I guess we don't see the forest for the trees for 2,000 years, and his whole theology is based on the fact, first of all, that he personally received totally unmerited mercy from God, the one who was the persecutor of the church. And so he realized that everything is faith, everything is grace, everything is gift, everything is mercy. None of the works that he did, or anybody does, could possibly merit any kind of grace or mercy on the part of God, or any kind of worthiness. So it's all mercy. Even our good works are mercy, as he says, many times. And remember that the ones precisely that who resisted Jesus in the gospel, his real struggle in the gospel was not with sinners, traditional sinners, who everybody considered sinners, prostitutes, and tax collectors, and sinners. His struggle in the gospel was with those who were not sinners, but righteous. Those who considered themselves righteous because they followed the law and upheld the law and did according to the law. The Pope mentioned yesterday as well, he evoked those figures, those prominent figures from the parables. For example, the elder son in the parable of the prodigal son. You remember, the one who was always faithful and always upheld the law and always did what he was supposed to, but who closed his heart, maybe as a result of that, to his very own brother who went through the mess of life and discovered the mercy, the true value and true meaning of God's mercy in his own life, who found himself the one who was lost, while the one who was never lost was actually lost, because he never understood mercy, righteous as he was, faithful as he was. It's a message there. Pope also evoked the workers in the vineyard in the parable from Matthew, who worked all day in the vineyard under the heat of the sun, and then his last arrived, the one who only worked 1 hour. What do you mean? rewarding him, showing him all this mercy. We're the ones that have been faithful all this time, that have worked so faithfully in the vineyard. And they close their hearts. The vineyard owner asks them, are you jealous because I'm generous? So we've been reading these for 2,000 years and we still don't get it. The true dimensions of God's mercy, the true dimensions of salvation. And it's gone to the most incredible extremes. Someone pointed out recently, I think again accurately, that just as in the Republican Party today, there's this extreme far right called the Tea Party with the most extreme and outrageous and almost apocalyptic language sometimes. Well, similarly, we heard at the Synod, and to quote the Holy Father, he said, some of the interventions were unfortunately not very well-meaning. You have the same kind of extreme far-right apocalyptic language. What is wrong with us? That we so miss the gospel, sometimes especially those who should know better, like Jesus' own disciples, the religious authorities. What is behind this? Well, I think if you look at the second reading today, we get a bit of a clue as to what goes on, not only in their life, but can happen in our lives. Any of us can fall into this trap. It's the trap of the pious, the trap of the devout, who become God's worst enemies if they're not careful. Ironically, paradoxically. Anyway, the second reading says, those who are called to be high priests are called to be priests. Well, let's consider us priests and bishops here, but that can apply to all of us on some level. Now, we're all called by God for something. And when we priests over the centuries have gloried in that phrase, which is a quote from Psalm 110, the first verse, from Psalm 110, quoted in the letter to the Hebrews today, you are priests forever, according to the order of Melchizedek, and we've gloried in this dignity, and this majesty, and this vocation. But we've forgotten the first part of today's reading from the letter to the Hebrews. It says the priest is able to sympathize, to empathize with those who are going astray, those who are ignorant, those who are searching, those who are confused, because he himself is beset with weakness. He himself knows the human condition and does not run away from the human condition, including in himself. Whereas if you do run away from the human condition, well, then you're running away from everybody else's human condition. And that's where you wind up. The crucial thing is to engage, to go down and accept, understand, explore your own weakness, the own abyss of the shadows and the tendencies and the fearful dark humanity that is part of all of us that we symbolize on Halloween, but it's always there. And what do? Do we run away from it? Do we repress it? Do we suppress it and follow the law? And keep up appearances? Or do we really allow God to go down into the muck of our humanity? All of it, and to embrace it, to love it, to kiss it like the leper, like Francis kissing the leper, to accept, to forgive, to embrace, to transform, to heal. We have to do that with our own humanity, by all sorts of ways, prayer, therapy, whatever it takes, to accept our humanity the way God does. The way God goes down into the depths of our humanity, reminds us everything is mercy. That's how God treats us. Where you can't run away from that. If you don't go down into the depths as God does and really experience what God's mercy is, you won't be healed. And, well, what will happen? You'll become hard, the hardness of heart. You'll become cruel, violently judgmental, apocalyptic even. Because whatever you don't face in yourself, very elementary psychologically, whatever you don't face in yourself, you project outwards onto all those sinners out there, onto all those who are unworthy, onto all those who don't follow the law, all those immigrants, all those Muslims, all those gay people, whatever it might be, they're the sinners. And we are the righteous ones. We uphold the law. and you become cruel and judgmental and violent. Just look around. Who killed Jesus? The tax collectors, the prostitutes, the sinners? No, the righteous ones. The upholders of the law. They killed Jesus. Well, look around today, especially in Muslim countries. Perfect example today. Sharia law, we have to follow the law and all these details. And if you don't, you get your head chopped off. You get your hand chopped off. Violence and cruelty, religious fanaticism, they all go together. And that's where it will lead. Or look in our own country. Didn't we just have the example of that Christian church where members of a family beat up and in fact killed one member of their own family for the guilt and the shame and the fear that they didn't look at their dark side, but projected it out and stoned it and killed it on somebody else? The righteous. Cruelty and violence. If you treat yourself with violence, you treat everybody else with violence too. Or as Cardinal Marx said, the church is not a castle under siege. But if you think your own being is a castle under siege, well, you'll think that's what the church is and what life is. But if you realize that life is for honesty and truth and healing, love, mercy, then the church and life will be what, well, it's exactly what Pope Francis said so strongly it is. It's a field hospital. Rather be a church that gets out there and gets messy, gets soiled, that loses its purity, rather than be caught in your ivory tower, as he said. I mean, why is it such a surprise that he's saying these things? It's clearly the gospel. But this is what happens. We don't open our hearts to mercy. We have to do our own soul work, allow ourselves to experience the depth and the beauty and the totally undeserved quality of God's love and mercy, and then we can be a channel of that to others. But if we insist on sealing all that off, just counting on the law and following the rules, well, then we'll demand that of everybody else, and we'll wind up with hearts as hard as stone. The only thing that really incited Jesus' wrath. So, in the end, the ones who are crying out on the side of the road, blind and begging, aren't the sinners and the tax collectors and the prostitutes. It's the righteous. It's the ones who say they see who are really blind. They're the ones who are really crying out, who ought to cry out. Remember that majestic parable in John chapter 9 that we read during Lent of the man born blind? That whole story about how he was cured, but the religious authorities couldn't believe that Jesus would break the Sabbath, wouldn't keep the rule or the law. Whatever he did, even the most miraculous, merciful, beautiful cure. No, can't see that because he broke the rules. That's what's important. That's what happens. You can't even see. So at the end of the parable, you remember, the Pharisees heard Jesus and they said, "What, are you calling us blind too?" And Jesus says, if you were blind, there's no sin in that. In other words, we're all blind, we're all weak and in need of mercy. That's not the problem. But, he said, because you say we see, your guilt remains. So as long as we say we see and we know the rules and we keep the rules and we're righteous, we're the most dangerous people on the planet. Remember, who killed Jesus, who may continue to kill Jesus, are not the sinners. They're the righteous.